All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. This is the session called Telling Our Story Data Collection in the Real World. And my name is Maggie Witt. I'm an air pollution specialist in the Mobile Source Control Division at CARB. And that's the division that houses both the light duty and the mobility incentive purchase projects. I'll be the host for today's session, and I think it's going to provide a great opportunity for learning, sharing, problem solving, and relationship building. So let's go ahead and get started. Great. Okay, so this is the timeline for our next hour or so. So first, I'm going to open up the session with some context and table setting. And what I'm really doing here is just providing CARB's perspective on the importance of metrics and data collection. But then we're going to have a really fun Q&A session with the panelists. They're from the Shared Use Mobility Center and also the Center for Sustainable Energy. And I will introduce them a little bit later. But what they're going to do is share their firsthand experiences on collecting, managing, and analyzing data for their projects. And those projects are the Clean Mobility Options and Clean Vehicle Rebate Project, respectively. But CSE is also involved in a lot of other data collection efforts, too. The session will conclude with an open floor discussion. I'm sorry. I forgot one extremely important part. After our panel Q&A, you're all actually going to get the opportunity to talk amongst yourselves. So this is an opportunity to reflect on panel insights, share with each other your own experiences and challenges with data collection, and collaboratively, if you want to, develop some questions for the panel. And really, it's an opportunity to do more of that networking and get to know each other so you can continue to connect today and in the future. Okay, now I'm ready to talk about how we'll conclude the session, which is with the open floor discussion, where all of you can pose questions to the panelists. You can opt to share out your key takeaways from your breakout discussions, or just share other thoughts and questions as well. Okay. Let's see. Before I launch into the first agenda item, I wanted to tell you a little bit about me and why I'm facilitating today's session. So as I said earlier, my name is Maggie Witt, and I'm a staff charged with helping to coordinate and organize data and metrics for the light duty purchase incentive projects and also the mobility projects. So these are including both active projects and some of our projects that have closed, like the Clean Vehicle Rebate Project, or CVRP, as some of you may know it. And then also the financing assistance pilots that have now been folded into the statewide Driving Clean Assistance Program. Over the past year, I've been working both internally with staff and occasionally with some of our program administrators and grantees to try to better understand what metrics we collect and how we use the data that we've collected. And then my partner in crime on this has been Isaac Sonnenfeldt. He's up here in the front. He works with the Rebel Group, and he works a lot on Cal ITP, but he's been just so valuable and instrumental in helping me with this effort as well. So Isaac may be chiming in from time to time throughout today as well. All right. So as I've worked in my current role, I've started to really understand better the reasons why we collect different metrics and data. And I thought it would be helpful to start today's session by highlighting this so you can all better understand, why is CARB asking for all this data from grantees and what's the whole purpose behind all that. So one key purpose for it is that project data allows us to evaluate program and project effectiveness and to assess if and how purchase incentives and mobility projects are achieving their goals. So this information can be used to help us decide if and when there might be a need for a policy or project design changes, or let us know if we're on track. Second, there are several metrics that grantees and project administrators report to CARB because then we, in turn, have to report them elsewhere. So examples include there are metrics that we have to report to California climate investments, and that's required for any project that gets greenhouse gas reduction funds. They have to report certain metrics. Other required metrics include those that have been identified as necessary for CARB to address an audit that we experienced in 2021 by the California State Auditor. There are also metrics that we include in various reports that we're required to submit to the legislature to tell them about our incentive projects as well. So that's another category of metrics. And then lastly, CARB uses project data to assess the impact and really try to tell the story of our incentive projects. And this is really important because, we acknowledge the need to demonstrate to lawmakers, stakeholders, and the people of California, the public, the benefits that these projects deliver to communities throughout the state. Okay, so clearly we have many uses for project data, but we also acknowledge that our perspective is just one part of the larger whole. And many of our grantees, project administrators, and other stakeholders have really specific and tailored uses for the data that they collect. And we strongly encourage our grantees to collect and analyze data that you need to run your projects the best that you possibly can. And whatever is most useful in implementing those projects. So I think during our panel Q&A, we're going to explore this a little bit, kind of know that I'm going to pepper these guys with some questions on that, but just a good thing for everyone to keep in mind. At the end of the day, from CARB's perspective, our main hope is that just we continue to be coordinated and communicating with our grantees so they know what metrics we need and what we're using them for, and we can be aware of the data that they may be collecting on their end to help them implement their projects in the best possible way. And I think this is pretty much the last thing I'm going to say in my portion, but I just wanted to emphasize that we know that data collection, management, and analysis are truly valuable, but they can also be very challenging and they require balancing. We know that more is not always better, that requiring more data to be collected often has diminishing returns, and in some cases, it can just make it really difficult for our grantees and be detrimental to the quality and insights. So for this reason, we do encourage all of you to think about this as you develop your data collection protocols and talk to us at CARB about the data collection that we're working hopefully collaboratively with you to figure that out and navigate that. And I also hope that you'll leave today's session with an expanded appreciation for the incredible value that data collection and analysis can bring to your projects and ultimately to the people that we serve in the state of California. Okay, now's the fun part. And now we're going to have our discussion with our esteemed panelists, who I'm just so grateful for all of you for being here today. As I said earlier, our panelists are from the Shared Use Mobility Center. You might hear it referred to as SUMC. So just be prepared. There's an acronym number 1, or probably number 13 that I've already said. And SUMC oversees data collection, management, and analysis for the Clean Mobility Options program. And then the Center for Sustainable Energy, or CSE, another fun acronym for you all, served as the project administrator for the Clean Vehicle Rebate Project. And as I said earlier, they remain involved in various data collection and analysis efforts. I asked everybody for their bios, so I'm going to just go ahead and introduce them. And then we're going to get launched in. So first off, Lauren McCarthy, PhD, is the Senior Director of Research and Impact at SUMC and oversees and advises across SUMC's research initiatives. Before joining SUMC, Lauren was the Program Manager and Senior Researcher for the Center for Transportation Public-Private Partnership, policy at George Mason University. Did I get that right?
It's a mouthful. Yes.
Okay. That was a lot.
I still can't say it. No,
In 2019, she was selected as a Google Public Policy Fellow, and she concluded her doctoral studies at Schar. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Schar School of Public Policy and Government at George Mason University. And she also got a BS in Business Administration and an MA in Geography from the State University of New York at Buffalo. So that's Lauren. Yes. Next up, we have John Anderson, and he is a senior manager for transparency and insights at CSE. John has 11, maybe 12 years.
13 now.
Oh gosh. Okay. 13. My gosh.
That's what I get for not updating my bio. Sorry.
I need to work on my math too. I should have known because I think it was 11 2 years ago or something like that. So 11 years experience and working to expand interest in and access to clean transportation. His efforts at CSE focus on research and evaluation for electric vehicle incentive programs, and he seeks to help programs understand their value and to share market advancing insights with policymakers. He's got a master's degree from Michigan State University in program evaluation. A perfect fit for what you're doing. Sounds great. Last up, Lauri Walker serves as the Director of Equity Engagement and Outreach at CSE. Lauri is a passionate advocate for equitable access to sustainable technologies, and she has 27, is that right? 27-ish years of experience advancing transportation and distributed energy programs. She leads a dedicated team of equity specialists and oversees a dynamic community partner network of community-based organizations and environmental justice organizations. And together they work across multiple states to break down barriers to electric vehicle and clean energy access in priority and environmental justice communities. So I have prepared some questions for our panelists, and we're gonna spend the next 15 minutes or so seeing how many of those we can get through before we transition to our small group discussions. So I'm gonna start off with that, but as I told my panelists, I hope that this will be very casual and that we'll kind of converse. And if you have questions for each other or whatever, please hop in and do that. So first off, I would just love to hear from each of you how you've used data that you've collected for your project to inform changes and improvements in your programs, really trying to get at that part of my Venn diagram of like, what is the data that you have used to advance your programs? And I'll start with Lauren.
Hi, everyone. Move this a little closer. So I'm fairly soft-spoken. There we go. So SumC is part of the program administrator team for the Clean Mobility Options Voucher Pilot Program, along with CalSTART. Part of our role as program administrator is that we also had a lot of that got louder ways. We were able to influence the program design as well through the implementation manual for the project. So one example on the program side was initially in window 1, which we refer to for the first round of funding for the for the community transportation needs assessment, which were the planning grants. We did a full-scale evaluation. We collected a lot of data relative to that program, and we're able to make substantive program changes based on what we had collected and evaluated in that round. A lot of it had to do with type of data types. For tribes, for example, learning about just prices for vehicles and different, were we able to change the requirements to increase the funding? Actually was one of the main requirements of realizing that, the initial amount wasn't enough, right? So all of that data got pulled together in order to then advance and update the program, make it better for the awardees. On the project side, for the implementation and the voucher projects, we actually work very closely with the awardees, collect telematics data, survey data, all this other information and that we put together. And one example for a particular group was Calexico, a project down in Calexico that's microtransit. We actually were able to, we did the first round of evaluation and noticed there's clear hotspots where lots of people are going, even though it's a free-floating on-demand system. And so we created a model, worked with them using that data to give them the option of thinking about even refining their project model. Because maybe it doesn't need to be free-floating. Maybe it could be more fixed or hybrid or flexible. And so we're able to put that data together and bring that back to the awardee to help them understand where are people going and how are they using the service. So it works both ways for us, being able to do on the program design side, and then also work with the awardees to be able to help them refine their project models.
Great. Thanks, Lauren. How about for CSE, John?
Yeah, happy to jump in here. I think I'm going to say some similar things to what Lauren just said, but the data that we collect through program implementation and through other instruments like surveys and things like that are some of the main tools we use to make decisions about the program and also to inform program design changes that might come up in the course of implementing a big program. By way of example, when the CVRP added the income criteria in 2016, 2017, we spent a lot of time looking at the data that we'd collected in the normal course of administering the program, to whom are these rebates going, where, for what vehicles, things like that, but also the survey data that we'd collected about people who are participating in terms of their household incomes and the value they're getting out of the program in terms of making it possible for them to acquire their vehicles, to understand how those income criteria might change budgetary demands, might change progress towards state goals, might better align with a more efficient use of state dollars in terms of the impact that you're getting out of those rebates. So we were able to bring all that information to bear on those conversations when we were talking about where do we set the income cap levels and how do we think about changing those when we realized that they were too high, for example. I think that was 9 months after we initially set them as a group. So just one example of how we've brought those data to bear on that decision making. We've also used it to understand program experience for applicants. I'm thinking in particular about the pre-qualification element of the CVRP. And we use that survey data that we collected to understand why people were dropping out of pre-qualification or what challenges they're experiencing in the process of getting from applying for the program to actually purchasing their vehicle and finishing out an incentive. So a couple examples there.
Anything to add there, Lauri?
Hi, everybody. So first of all, I just want to say that I'm really honored to be sitting here with all these data brilliant minds. I'm outreach. I'm a people person. I connect with the community, I connect with people, and making sure that we can take this data and actually learn from that and learn how do we reach the consumers that we're trying to reach. How do we reach into the communities? How do we better understand their pain points? Very, very valuable. It has created us opportunities to actually shift some of the approach that we take with the community and make sure that we are breaking down those barriers, making sure that we understand, is it cost? Is it reliability? What is it? So the data is absolutely extremely valuable for us in our outreach and making sure that the communities that we're reaching, we make sure that they have the opportunity to get into that EV for it to be a real game changer. Definitely.
Awesome. Thank you. So my next question I feel is going to maybe get at this, but I have a little bit of a follow-up for you, Lauri, maybe on this one. So can you give us some examples of the data that, what kind of data did you get that helped you understand how you should pivot on any of your outreach efforts?
So as with most, I think, administrators of these programs, we understand the secret sauce that it is to reach into those communities and to get that trusted resource utilizing community-based organizations or community leaders or environmental justice organizations. And it's really, really important that we take that data that we're learning from and actually utilize it as best that we possibly can. That in itself, utilizing them to get the information out, to retrieve, can definitely better serve all of our ways that we go about. And we have shifted quite a bit. But we have found that utilizing a trusted resource like these organizations and becoming partners and understanding that each one of them are very individual. One thing that I will say just really quickly about California is the community and the folks that live in this beautiful state are as diverse as the landscape and the geographic, and we can't, and the geography. We can't assume that one particular demographic is going to be the same fit for everyone across the board. So by able to track that data and information, it really does kind of drive home the point so that we can target a little bit better in reaching the audience that we're trying to reach.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks.
So when we were prepping for this session, I asked the panelists kind of what were some themes that they wanted to hit on. And one that we talked quite a bit about were surveys. So I am going to ask a question or two about surveys. And I think that's the part of the reason why it was such a dynamic discussion is because we can get really interesting and good information from surveys, but surveys are also can be very challenging. So the question is, talking about surveys, and when I'm talking about that, what we're thinking about is often what is distributed to project participants. Maybe people have used the mobility project, used whatever service the mobility project provides, or they've participated in the outreach. I'm hoping that each of you can provide an example of a challenge and an opportunity that is related to collecting data with surveys. And I'm going to change up the order a little bit. Let's start with John.
Sure. I think surveys are particularly important because some bits of information, the only way you can get at the information is by asking people. Mm-hmm. I think in particular, things related to identity and household characteristics are not something that you can get at through other sources. So whether it's a survey or some other mechanism, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about that later, getting in front of people and asking well, how do you identify? And I need that information so I can understand if we're aligning our implementation of a program in such a way that we're reaching the audiences that we need to reach in a diverse and inclusive way. So surveys are absolutely critical for that reason. I think it also helps us understand the extent to which our participants are valuing the programs. Are these programs actually doing what we think that they're doing? And we can measure that with external sources and look at before the implementation of the program and after, and using different techniques try to tease out the value those programs are having. But actually going to people and saying could you have done this without the incentive is a really useful input to understanding the impact that those programs have. So I think surveys present a great opportunity to do that, particularly for large programs where we have diverse audiences and lots of folks that we want to hear from on those topics. They can help illuminate those things in our program design.
Lauri, we'll put you next up, changing up the order.
Yeah, sure, no problem. I'll try to be as quick and succinct as possible. I would have to say that there are absolute challenges when it comes to survey work. Survey fatigue comes to mind, depending on where the survey is being taken, whether it's at an event. We thought about this amazing idea as we're doing ride and drives, electric vehicle ride and drives, and a lot of the attendees have never been in an EV before, so we wanted to really gather what their perception was about an EV, have them do the test drive, come out, and then do a follow-up test drive. We quickly found out that some people were engaged in the pre-test drive. It was very hard to get them after the test drive. If they didn't kind of escape from us or were just I just answered, 20 questions. I just want to continue on my journey here. So it can be a double-edged sword. The information that we gather is absolutely extremely valuable. But then again, we have to be very careful how we position and how we take that opportunity to actually survey the folks that we're trying to get the data from. So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think for a program like CMO, the biggest challenge is we always say addressing the why. But for a program like CMO, there's two layers of why, because it is a survey coming from it's similar probably in your programs, but it's coming from the administrator. We've created a survey. We're now giving it to an awardee and saying, this is a requirement. You need to go survey the community that you're serving, and then they need to take that survey and actually get it in the hands of the community members and get responses. Like that is a very challenging process, and at each level of communicating why is this important, right? I think our priorities are what Maggie outlined, right? We're trying to gather as much information as possible to be able to assess the program. We're trying to make sure that we're giving the awardees information that they need to be able to deliver a good program and understand the community. And then the awardees take it, and it's their responsibility to deploy the survey as part of the program requirements. And that is a very challenging step to say, okay, well, my priority as an awardee is to deliver a program, right? A survey might not be the most, number one priority for them while they're trying to figure out all of the pieces of getting wheels on the ground. And then you get to the community member who's like, I just want to ride. Like, I just want to use this service. This is exciting. And now I have to stop and take a survey. And something that came up in our discussion, thinking about the difference between the what is that initial incentive? Where if you're getting a $7,500 voucher, there might be a more obvious, yes, I'm getting a check in the mail. I will, and their response rate for some of your surveys is astronomical. To 20% is unbelievable for surveys, right? For us, it's we're lucky if we get 20, 100 people responding to the survey, because to them it's that immediate transaction of this is just standing in my my way to get a ride, not necessarily the 5 years of funded rides that you will be accessing. And so it's a very difficult message and a challenge that I think we face all the time, and working very closely with awardees, operators, talking about why is this important and what the value is to you, because I think that can break down at each step of the chain.
Go ahead. Yeah.
One more point I wanted to make is sometimes surveys aren't the right approach.
Yes.
Right? I love Lauri's example about the ride and drive events, because people are like, I want to go to the next booth. I'm done. And perhaps that's an opportunity. A lesson that I take away from that is maybe we could have had people in the cars with folks as they were driving around doing the ride and drive events, asking the questions and just jotting down the answers as people were actually having the experiences. That, more expensive. It's you're probably not going to get standardized responses that you can quantify in the same way, but you are collecting useful information that can be valuable to the project implementation, or to and more effective in terms of getting responses, right? Because they're in the car with you.
Yeah. So that's a perfect segue, because I kind of feel like I want to talk a little bit more about other means of obtaining data. But before I transition off, we had talked about, this, I had written down a question about what's something you got from deploying surveys that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise? And I'm wondering if you guys want to add anything to what you already said to answer that. If not, we can move on to the next thing. But yeah, I just want to put that out there. Go ahead, Lauren. Yeah,
I can just jump in, because one of the goals behind doing the surveys for CMO and how I've designed the process is being able to look at the perceptions versus the objective data. And you can only get perceptions from survey data, or other interfaces with communities. So interviews, focus groups, I'm sure we're going to talk about. But the surveys are the most effective, wide-reaching way to get perception data. How, can you do the activities that you would like to do, right? Measuring perceived accessibility, and then comparing that against objective data. Yes, the bus stop is a block away. It is there. How easy is it for me to actually get there? And when you look at that gap, that's your equity gap. That is the difference between, yes, I put a bus stop here, and yes, or this is where, the bike share is, to, yes, I can actually get there and use this service, right? Mm-hmm. Or, so being able to do that, that's so important. That's how we've really benefited by understanding that gap, and then being able to share that back to the communities, to program administrators, to CARB, right? That's where it really gains momentum, and it's so valuable.
Yeah, that's a great example. Do you guys have something to add, or?
Yeah, I think we heard a great presentation from Dr. Brett Williams, who looked away just as I said his name earlier today, about one example about how we're using this information to understand where we are in our journey towards where we want to be with vehicle electrification, particularly equitable access to vehicle electrification. And I think that that survey data presents a really useful way to assess that progress, right? It also presents, particularly if the data are aligned with other programs, an opportunity to do appropriate comparisons between different programs to see, if something's working in one community but not in my community, why might that be? What similarities or differences are emerging between the execution of a program across different communities can yield useful insights as well. So we can understand impact. To what extent is this program enabling the behavior that we would like to see, the access to the technology we would like to see? We can see to what extent people are participating from different groups and understand participation in that way. So it presents a lot of useful analyses that we can do.
Cool. Great. Okay. So I did want, like I said, to talk about other data collection methodologies. So I'm wondering if we can go down the line and maybe have each of you shed some light on some other methods that are useful when surveys just simply don't make sense. And, maybe just highlight a real, exciting kind of outcome from that you've been able to observe from some of these other methods that you've used. And this time I will start with Lauri. Or with John.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to think about, I was going to say we've got amazing dashboards that the team has developed. But there you go again, it's getting that information, whether it's through, I think, Lauren, you had mentioned, it's wonderful when you get that big check in the mail. You're more willing when it's that big to fill out a survey, and we take that data and we can put it into a dashboard so that it's available for any of the stakeholders, whether they're, one of our clients or not. It's valuable. It's very valuable, and it can be seen by everybody everywhere. We do a lot of sometimes when we're out there in the field or our partners are out there in the field, we ask them, can you start lessons learned? What are you hearing? What are they saying? What's being communicated? And we track that data. When we have partners, we meet with them on a monthly basis, if not more often, to make sure that they are being successful out in the field and reaching the communities. And that's the big piece, is that lessons learned are so very valuable. And so that's another way that, from a community outreach standpoint, that we track what's going on there besides the regular standard type of survey.
I really love that you highlighted that, because I think that was kind of like a little bit of a theme from last year too, that we heard. A lot of our audience members at last year's symposium were talking about, this kind of characterizing it more like qualitative data, and it can be like the conversations that you have, the testimonials that you get, the one-on-one, those one-on-one conversations, that's data. It's and a lot of people will be like, oh, but what's the number? What's the percent? But it truly is data. So I'm glad you highlighted that. Yeah. How about you, John?
Just to build on what Lauri said a little bit, I think one of the things I was really excited about the data that your team collected, Lauri, was the expert assessment of how an event went, so that we could think about future events that are of similar nature and understand, like, to what extent we think that might be impactful for us to attend, right? I thought that was a really good use of that data collection. I would argue that application data is extremely valuable, and that is a really rich resource. The data that you collect that are in service of implementing your program, where am I sending the check? For what am I sending the check? Those kinds of information are super important to informing design around programs and decision making and things like that. I'm really, really excited about mixed methods approaches right now, where we start off by talking to people about the problem that we're trying to address, and then use that to set up our data collection for the next stage, which might be to quantify that, right? So we hear about all the ways in which people are struggling with charging infrastructure, and then we go survey people in a way that is informed by the discussions that we had. So I think that's a really interesting approach.
Yeah, and I think, rolling up to me, it's like, at the end of the day, what's the purpose of data? And data is to tell a story, right? That's what this whole panel is about. And so, survey data is one piece of the puzzle. I mean, if we're doing site visits, like our team does site visits, we go on the ground, we observe, we do ride-alongs, we talk with drivers, we talk with community members, we interview people. that have used the service or have had some sort of interaction with the service. Obviously, we have telematics data coming out of, per trip, raw data, and at the end of the day, it's piecing all of that together. And the application data, I'm glad you mentioned that, because a big part of doing any evaluation, right, we have logic models, we have theories of change that are pulling all of this together and building all of that out so that we can tell the story of the community, and it's piecing all this together, right? Because at the end of the day, it's their project, it's their story. We're just here to try and put it together and make sure that, we're showing impact, we're showing success, and also when it doesn't work, right? And being able to feed that information back. So, there's just so many different methods and data that we're collecting through this process that go beyond survey data that is just incredibly valuable.
Awesome. Great. So I am going to transition us over to our small groups, but before we do that, I'm going rogue a little bit, panel. Sorry about that. I'm going to ask each of you if there's anything kind of like last words you want to say before people go into these discussions. Like if there was a point or a theme that you wanted to talk about, we didn't get a chance to talk about yet, that you kind of want to plant the seed if people want to talk about that in the small group. So let's just go down the line and start with Lauren. Do you have anything you want to add? And you can pass.
Well, one thing that I was going to talk about is just like the learning process on our end too, right? And especially for a program that has multiple windows, multiple funding like opportunities, it's like we continuously have learned how to make this better. Like we didn't come out of the gate perfect. We're still far from it, right? But it's like we're constantly learning how to work within these confines of the program, also making sure like building relationships with our awardees and the communities and piecing all that together to the point where there were a lot of challenges in the first window. We had the pandemic happen, like so many things, lots of things were happening. People, and now it's like, okay, we're in the window 2, things are happening, they're going smoother, like a lot of the challenges we've had in the past, we're getting through them, and now really prioritizing and focusing on the storytelling. So it's just also just the learning element all around of how to do this better and how to work with the communities in a way that, again, is benefiting them first and foremost.
Absolutely. Data collection can be hard and intimidating as well. And I think there are a ton of resources out there to help folks do good data collection. And I really cherish gatherings like this where we can kind of get together and talk about what's working and what's not working for our specific context, because I think we can learn a lot from each other. And CARB's drive to kind of standardize data collection instruments and offer resources and things to folks that presents a really good opportunity to make the barrier a little bit lower and make it a little easier to engage with these things. So I'm excited about that as well. And I had one other thought that just left my brain, so I'm gonna stop talking.
Well, maybe I'll just say a few things. Maybe you'll think about it. I guess my 2 cents, to be honest, is just to be as open as you can, and to be able to work with, if you're going into one community and something might be working really well, and you go into another community, if it's not going to work that way, then it's okay. It's okay to change it up. I think that we've been really very fortunate with CARB and the fact that they've been so open and so willing to allow us to kind of test drive, no pun intended, with all of the data that's collected and how we collect it and why we're collecting it that way. So, that's all I can add to that.
You sparked my last thought for me. Things change over time, right? The way, the best practices, the ways that we gather information, we're learning more about how to make that more inclusive and more accessible and things like that over time. So we have opportunities over time to improve how we're doing things, and we should definitely take those. That was my last thought.
Awesome. Great. All right. So we are going to do a breakout and a breakout, and it's an experiment. So thanks all for being our guinea pigs and trying this out. So it was really just an effort to try to, just spur some conversation and get the blood flowing and whatnot. So in the room here, I know we've got this like theater style thing, but we are the last session of the day. So move your chairs around and make little circles or move over to another side of the room or whatever. And I am going to throw up on the screen right now. We do have some prompts. So it'll be up on the screen in the room, but folks who are online, if you want to take a screenshot or something, we are going to have this still up, but it might be a little bit smaller on your screen. So it might be a good idea if you don't want to have to squint too much. For the people online, we unfortunately are not able to do the small breakouts. So everybody online is going to be in their own breakout session. And Isaac has graciously offered to, there's Isaac. He's going to join the Zoom so that he can just help, kind of help that along, because I know it can be a little tricky maybe with that group. It's really going to be a quick thing. We're going to have like 10 minutes of this tiny little discussion, and then we are going to all come back together, and you're going to have a chance to ask questions of the panelists and talk to each other in the larger group setting. With that, please go ahead and get into little groups. Okay, folks, let's go ahead and wrap up our small groups so that we have a little bit of time for folks to regroup, ask questions of our panelists, whatnot.
There's feedback happening. Is that? Oh, sorry.
Did that fix it? We're hearing less feedback. Yes. Please, you don't have to turn your chairs around if you don't want to, but if you want to, you can turn around. And then hopefully the folks, Isaac's back in the room. So I think, okay, awesome. So our virtual breakout group has reconvened. Oh, we have 8 minutes left. Oh, I thought we went to 4:45. Okay. So we have just 8 minutes left for Q&A and any share outs that folks want to do. So I think we have mics maybe for in the room. Oh, yeah, we do. Okay, cool. Awesome. And I could probably be the mic.
1 2
Okay, let's start within the room. Does anybody have any questions or like something you want to share out from the group? Testing. Anybody in the room? Yeah. Let me give you the mic so people online can hear you.
Petros from City Heights CDC. One of the challenges that stood out to me, I'm currently holding surveys for the city of San Diego for digital equity and finding out people's experiences, and questions I feel like sometimes could be really long and could be a complete turn off to people, and by the end they're so frustrated they just want to get through it, and that's when you actually have them take the survey right in front of you. And so I could only imagine when they're away and you give them the flyer, do they just give up midway? So those are some of the challenges that I feel like I've experienced, and also the language aspect of it. Even if you provide them with a survey in Spanish, the flyer, when they scan it, it's in English. Now they have to press a button, and do they go that extra step to translate it to Swahili or Spanish? And so those are some of the things I've experienced. And so what do you think is the best way to resolve that?
We have the same challenges. I think one of the things that we prioritized for the surveys for CMO is trying to, yes, there's still 30, 40 questions, right? I mean, demographic questions alone are often 10, 15 questions. Obviously, yes, trying to get it as short as possible, but there's just a point where it's like, I can't get it any shorter, right? But making the language as plain as possible and making the response choices as easy as possible. I think oftentimes with surveys, I see a lot of like open text boxes. Those are hard. I don't answer those, right? When I have a survey. So it's like giving people radio button, check boxes, very clear responses, just trying to make it as easy as possible. It's something that we've tried to prioritize in designing the surveys for CMO. It's language is also difficult. Having direct links to the different translations I know has helped in the past, making sure it's very clear, like this is the QR code for Spanish, this is the QR code for English. Because I know oftentimes with the survey, you can toggle, and we've done the same thing, and yet most people just end up on the English one. And when we look at the analytics, it's like if that's the case and there's a toggle, we'll get almost all of the responses in the English survey. Even if in the question where we ask, what is your main language spoken at home, we'll see maybe like 25% Spanish, but they answered the survey in English. And so it's like, well, it would have been great if it would have been a lot easier for them to get to the Spanish version, right? And that's on the awardee. So breaking it down into those pieces, and there's ways to do that in most survey softwares. So I don't know which project you're working on exactly, but maybe bringing that recommendation back if you're not seeing that from the administrator team.
I should preface this comment by saying that our survey got to 120 questions at one point.
40 doesn't look so bad. That's all I gotta say.
It can be so hard to be disciplined about like what you're putting on a survey, right? And especially when you're bringing multiple folks into the room that all have different research questions they want to answer and things like this. The impulse to put a lot on there is so strong. But yeah, just to echo Lauren, that to the extent you can cut and make things as simple as possible. And it's also really tempting to jump for those kind of interesting looking different mechanisms for asking questions, sliding rank orders around and dials and things like this. But keeping it simple and as short as possible is a recommendation that I would pass. Yeah.
Just really quickly, I have a question for you. I don't know if it's on. My question is, have you gone back to like the city of San Diego? And by the way, you all do great work. I just want to say that. But have you gone back to like the city and said, these are the problems that we're having? I'm assuming that you're getting the survey questions directly from them. Have you gone back to them and said, this is like impossible to do? Sometimes they'll be willing to be like, okay, we need the data, but are willing to kind of adjust it a little bit. Because when I heard you, I was like, oh, I love John, I love our team, but sometimes we don't see eye to eye. Sometimes I'll say, okay, if you don't believe me, I've gone to our partners, our CBOs, and they're saying, no way, give us 3 questions. And we try to find a happy medium. Clearly, I don't always win, but it's worth a shot.
Yeah, we've definitely expressed that, but I think there's probably 2 constraints. One might be budget. The city's unable to go back in time and do some of those works, and time constraints. So we've started this sessions of focus groups and doing these surveys, and so those might be some of the limitations that they have in order to address those matters. I wish, let's say, if you had 40 questions or 100, and you would in one survey type, you could just have 50 questions, or let's just reduce it to 40 questions. Have 20 surveys, and then another group just divide those survey questions so that not one person is answering all of them, but they're sort of answering just different questions, so that ultimately when you piece all those surveys together, you still get that picture, that answer, but not one person is answering all of them. But that's just an idea.
I think one other suggestion I have for you is to put the hard ones at the end, so that if you can get through a lot of those questions before the difficulty starts ramping up or the burden starts ramping up and people bail, you'll at least have a good set that you can draw from.
Well, and one thing, sorry, this is just a good question, because I think we're getting into flexibility wise, like talking about like with your partners or who you're working with. I mean, we've explored breaking out demographic questions separate from the rest of the questions. And this has been an option that's been presented to some of the awardees. The biggest thing is that in order for it to still be good results, you have to connect those answers somehow. Mm-hmm. So this is where you need to ask, like, if yes, you can do a sign-up survey that is demographic questions with like an email. But you need some kind of identifier to link the questions, because it actually does lose, it loses validity if you ask like this person to answer these 5 questions and these 5 questions, because part of the analysis, right, is going back and being able to pool segments, make sure you're serving who you want to be serving, and then what are their responses. And so it gets a little bit tricky, but you can break it up into smaller pieces as long as it's, this group of people answered demographic questions, and then maybe a subset of them at least are answering the next set of questions, and you're able to link those together. So there are, I think, some creative ways that we've definitely approached it that maybe you can suggest of like, maybe we can think differently about this. So there's definitely ways to do it.
All right. So I have a lesson learned to share, and that is that next time I facilitate a session, I'm going to do a better job of timekeeping, because we do have to wrap up. But the reason why I put up this last slide is because I do want to encourage all of you to reach out to any and all of us if you did have a question that you wanted to ask, but we ran out of time. But, I'll be around for the remainder of the day. There are closing remarks right now back in the main room, but I'm going to hang out in the foyer, and maybe there's going to be a happy hour downstairs. I don't know. We'll see. So you guys can please feel free to, yeah. I mean, I would advocate, but thank you all for joining. I really enjoyed being together with you all. Thanks for hanging in there with the small groups. Thanks so much to our panel. You are all amazing, and we're learning so much from you. And thanks for being here today, and we'll see you upstairs for the closing.